we're so fortunate not only to have the fact that we're by Rav Pam, we have so many chashuvim with us. Rav Ehrenreich is a principal. He's a principal of half of you who probably came here today. And we have Shlomi Dax, who's going to sing for us later at the end. And so many other chashuvim men and women. But it certainly is appropriate that we should start here by the kever of Rav Avram Pam, Rav Avram Yaakov Pam, who was born in 1913 and lived to be 88 years old. He was nifted in 2001. He was a kohen, and so therefore it's appropriate that we should start with Rav Pam. All of us who knew Rav Pam know that his edelkeit and his character were just exemplary. It's impossible to imagine a person like that getting angry. All of us who had the schus to know him and to hear him many, many times. I want to tell you a few stories about his edelkeit and his refined character. In 1950, long before he was a Rosh Hashiva, he lived in the East New York section of Brooklyn, and he would give a shir in the Young Israel of Nulatz. Rabbi Freifeld was the Rav at that time in the Young Israel of Nulatz. And every night Rav Pam would come to give a shir, and one night there was a snowstorm, and he was getting ready to walk. He was going to walk 8 blocks in this terrible snowstorm. And his wife said, "Why are you going? Nobody's going to show up, and it's freezing. You're going to catch a cold." And he said, "Even if there's one person there, I have to go to give that shir." So he was ready to go in the terrible snow, in the freezing weather, and he put on his boots and his gloves and his scarf, and his wife is begging him not to go, and of course he decided that he has to go. He comes and he walks into the shul there in the Young Israel of Nulatz to see if there's even anyone there. He's looking around, he sees one person there. The man's name was Benzion Raphael Lasker. And Benzion Raphael Lasker, he wasn't the guy who came every night. So like he said, "You're the last guy that I thought was going to be here. I thought if anybody would be one of the regulars. Why did you come?" He said, "Rebbe, I came because I knew you would come." Because he understood that Rav Pam is not going to let even one person down. If it's only one person that comes to the shir, he's going to be there. And Rav Pam walked, and Taka, that was the only person that was there, but that person came because he knew that Rav Pam was going to be there. I want to tell you what to me is the most moving story that I know about Rav Pam. There's a wonderful sefer, you can't even call it a book, it's a sefer, Kodesh Ad Miyoid, that was printed by Art Scroll. It's called Rav Pam. And in there on page 452, it tells a story about a Down syndrome boy. His name was Nata Shloima. That's the son of Baruch Rabinowitz. Now, we know that a Down syndrome child, it can be a very, very precious child. But sometimes, depending on the level of the child, a person has to have a certain amount of patience to understand where this child is coming from. And this particular story happened when the boy was 8 years old. Throughout the years, Rav Pam, this boy sometimes would come to Rav Pam. Rav Pam treated him with a lot of kavod and dignity. And maybe we should just move that away. Dolby, can we just move it away so it doesn't move it further away? Right. So Rav Pam always treated him with tremendous dignity. And this particular story happens on Simchas Torah. This boy, Nata Shloima, came with a little Sefer Torah. Obviously it wasn't a kosher Sefer Torah. It was made out of material. And he goes up to the Bal Tfilah or the Bal Korah, and he wants them to read from this Sefer Torah. Now the Gabbai told him once or twice that, it's a Apostle Sefer Torah, it's ridiculous. And after a while, the Gabbai was beginning to lose patience, and some people were beginning to lose patience with this boy, and no matter what anybody said, nobody was able to calm down this kid. He wanted on Simchas Torah they should read from his Torah. Go explain it to him. And then Rav Pam went over to him, whispered something in his ear, and the boy walked away from the bima. He sat down, and he didn't complain the rest of the laning and the rest of Musaf. And everybody was wondering, what in the world did Rav Pam say to this child? And then after Musaf, everybody saw. What happened after Musaf was that this boy walked up to the bima, and Rav Pam called together a minyan of people. What he had told the boy was that first we read from the big Sefer Torah. After davening, we're going to read from the little Sefer Torah. And Rav Pam had somebody open up that Sefer Torah and make believe that he's laning. And they called up 3 people as if they were having aliyas. And after those 3 people had aliyas, and whoever was the Bal Korah made as if he was reading from the Sefer Torah, They had Hagba, and they had Galila, and then they danced around with this little boy and the Sefer Torah, and everybody saw that's how you deal with people. With patience, and with love, and with sensitivity. I want to share with you a story that struck me very much, that should give all of us tremendous chizuk and a lesson that we will learn in a moment. There's a wonderful sefer that Rav Palm wrote. He told me that he edited it 8 different times. He once told me there's not one extra word in that sefer. It's called Atorah L'Melech, and you should all get it. It's written in Ivrit Kala, very simple Hebrew, and everybody can understand it. It's on the Parshiyos, and it's all essays on different topics. On page 120, he tells an amazing story. It was 1976, and he was with his Rebbetzin. They were in New Hampshire, and it was the last day of that vacation, and they were going to leave the next morning. And all of a sudden, Rav Palm felt very dehydrated, and he felt that he had to have something to drink. He needed a citrus fruit, and he said to his wife, I feel like I'm going to faint. I need a citrus fruit to drink. She didn't have anything anymore in the house, so she ran to a neighbor, and the only thing that she had was, the neighbor had a lemon. She brought back the lemon, and Rav Palm ripped open the lemon. That was not his nature, and he sucked out the juices of the bitter lemon, and he was hydrated, and he didn't faint. But he was very embarrassed at how he did it. Rav Palm was a very edel person. He was not the type to rip open a lemon that way. And a few days later, he saw one of his children, and he said to his children, you know what happened to me a few days ago? I felt so dehydrated, and Mama gave me that lemon, and I ripped it open. I never saw anybody rip open a lemon like that. And then he said, as he was talking to his son, he remembered something that happened 20 years earlier. He said he had gone to visit a Rav from the Bronx. He doesn't say who the Rav was, who was nebuch in a hospice, and the Rav was dying. And he didn't know what to bring this Rav. What do you bring somebody that's dying? So he decided he's going to bring him some fresh oranges. And he asked the Rav if he wants it, and the Rav didn't want it. So there was a man in the room next door who was also nebuch dying, who was already paralyzed, and he couldn't talk. He could only move his hands, but his body was paralyzed. So Rav Palm turned to him, and he gave him the oranges. He asked him, do you want it? And the man Nebuch was so thirsty, and he ripped open the oranges, and he sucked out the juices. The man Nebuch was so thirsty, and he couldn't even reach the button to press for the nurses. And Rav Palm writes, I did a wonderful thing. Hashem should have paid me back right away. He said, no, but Hashem waited 20 years when I needed that citrus fruit, and that's when he gave it to me. And he brings something which should give us all chizuk. And he brings an Or HaChaim HaKodesh, which is in the Aseres HaDibros, Shemois Chof Posik Vov. And you should try to remember this by heart. Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mishalem Lo Kol Chazdoi Teikef Umiyad. Hashem does not pay back all the good that we do right away. Ela Boichen Lo Oifen Piroyan. Hashem waits to pay us back Hanos L'Doiros. Sometimes it takes generations until Hashem pays back. But Hashem remembers every good thing that you do. Hashem pays in that generation that needs it. For example, sometimes you're driving on the highway and you think you're going to get into the accident. You could mamish feel the impact coming, and the last second you stop on a dime. How did that happen? Because 30 years ago, your Bubby did something so great, and Hashem said, I'm not going to waste it on a bungalow colony, on a home in a bungalow colony, or an extra refrigerator, or an extra fancy living room. When her granddaughter's on the highway and she has to be saved, that's when I'm going to pay her back. Or what about that kid who was supposed to go to Sabaros that morning, and all of a sudden he remembered, oh my gosh, I forgot my Gemara. So he got off the bus, and he didn't go to Sabaros, and he wasn't on that bus. Why? Because 35 years ago, his Zayda did something special. And his Zayda sometimes was wondering, how come Hashem, you didn't give me what you gave my neighbor? How come I didn't make that financial deal that my neighbor did? And Hashem was smarter. Hashem waited till 30 years later when his grandson was on that bus, and he made him get off that bus. And that's how we should look at it. Sometimes we do so many good things, and I know so many of you, such good people, and you think, Hashem, how come you're not paying me back? And you have to remember this lesson that the Heilige Rav Pam told us from the Orach Chaim. Hashem doesn't pay back right away. He waits. And when you really need it, when your son or your daughter or your grandchild needs it, that's when Hashem pays it back. And that's the lesson that we have to take from the Heilige Rav Pam. Not to be despondent. We go through difficult times, but Hashem knows, Hashem keeps a scorecard, and He knows when we need it. I just want to say one more thing that Rav Pam said, and Rav Pam used to give a shir in Tervadas every Friday. It was not open for the public except Pashas Chayesara. That was when he spoke about Shidduchim. And one time he said something that's so important. He said that sometimes, especially in Shidduchim, a boy is going out with a girl, or a girl's going out with a boy, and it doesn't work out, and they think, oh my goodness, if it doesn't work out, that's the end of me. How am I ever going to find somebody that's going to be as good as that person? And they think that it's the end. And Rav Pam says that we see in Parshas Bolok, Vayisyatzeiv Malach Hashem b'derech l'soton loy. The Malach Hashem was in the way. The donkey saw the Malach. Bilam didn't see it. And he thought, the Sotan's a Charangestellt. There's something bothering here. It's a Sotan. It doesn't let me. And Rashi brings Malach Shel Rachamim. It was the best thing that could have happened to Bilam. If he only would have not gone. It was the Malach Shel Rachamim. He thought the Sotan. He thought the Sotan's a Charangestellt. But really, that was the best thing for him. And sometimes when the Shidduch doesn't work out, Rav Pam said, you think, oy vey, it's the Sotan. Why didn't it work out? That's terrible. And then you find out 5 years later, oy never, if they would have married that person, how tragic and how terrible it would have been. So sometimes we think it's the Satan, but really it's the Malach Shel Rachamim. And again, what we bring out from here is what Rav Pam says: if something doesn't work out and you did everything that you can, be happy. Understand that there's an Eibishter who's orchestrating everything. I just want to end just with this thing that touched me so much I could never forget it, about Rebbetzin Pam. She is buried here. Many of us are old enough to remember in 1994 in May, Suri Feldman was lost. Remember that high school girl, Suri Feldman, was lost, and the whole world was going crazy. Everybody was looking for her, all the Hatzalah guys, and they were looking in Connecticut and to find in that big park where she was in Connecticut State Park. Now, I remember I was supposed to speak that Friday afternoon at a Torah Masera convention. But at Torah Masera convention, they have many sessions in the morning. So I was driving up, and everybody was in their sessions. Nobody could have heard the radio except me. As I was driving up, about 12 o'clock, I found out that Suri Feldman was found. And she was found very well, and she was found, and she was healthy. So as I began speaking at 1 o'clock, the first thing I wanted to tell everybody, because I knew nobody knew, I said, I just want everyone to know that Baruch Hashem, Suri Feldman was found, and she's healthy. And all of a sudden, I heard a scream from the back. I thought somebody fainted. And then I saw there was Rebbetzin Pam. She was so overwhelmed that this child was found. She just screamed out with joy and relief. That was her pain that she felt for a child that she didn't even know. But it was a child in Klal Yisrael. And that child that was lost, it was to her as if it was her grandchild. And that was the relief, and that was the pain that she felt. And that's the lesson of Avos Yisrael that we take from Rav Pam and his Heilige Rebbetzin, that they cared for each and every one of us. We should all say a kapitel Tillim. We'll say this kapitel, which I just want to say kapitel Tezayin together, and then you'll all daven.